just ask a couple of clarification questions over there? Have generally the people that you've worked with, has it been people where the crime and the communities are based in an urban space or a more rural space or a combination?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. We've had, of our cases, we've worked 2 cases in Suva, very close to the city. We've had other cases in rural communities, and then we've had at least one that was a maritime, so an island off the 2 major islands.
Okay.
Yeah, so in different spaces.
Okay. So given that you've been working on this for 3 years and so on, how would you describe the outcomes of these interventions?
You know, these outcomes have been very, very successful. It's been a relatively new concept when we first started, and we're very happy with the reception it's got. And I say that from the reception that we've got from both the police and the Fiji Correction Services. The aim was really to change the mindset of the offenders in terms of re-looking at what they've done, but more importantly, in influencing the system to acknowledge that whilst we invest a lot in rehabilitating the offender, the victim is also a very, very important person in this whole concept. In all of our systems, we tend to forget the victim, that one individual has not healed. So the success really is in the system acknowledging that the victim's own position must be acknowledged and managed, and the victim must be helped to heal and to move forward. So that's been a really big plus for us, with the system acknowledging that. The other, of course, is our entry into the space, into the law enforcement space, and being able to work with the law enforcement officers, especially those in the correction services, to provide them with skills and training which they would not normally get in their own space, and to change their perspectives on how they look at crime, not just as something that's been committed, as punishment meted out, and then when your time's over, you move on and you handle your own time. But I think more and more they're acknowledging that work beyond this must happen if we as a community have to move on. And I mentioned a phrase earlier, breaking the cycle of violence, and I think it's that acknowledgement that restorative justice is going to break the cycle of violence. I think also another success is the willingness of people to heal. It's not something we're forcing people to do, but people genuinely want to get out of the space they're in. We've worked with a few offenders who repeat offenders, and there's a genuine desire for them to want to stop coming back into this space. So there's a genuine desire to just get out of that and to stay out. And so their willingness to participate, I think, demonstrate that, not just for themselves, but also for their families. The families are also opening up and they're wanting to engage in dialogue. So I think it's a general acknowledgement on the part of not just ourselves, our families, but our communities to get a better life for all of us. And I think restorative justice allows us all to do that together, and to go on this journey together, to support each other, and also embrace new tools on how we can do that together.
Thank you so much. What kind of challenges have you faced in doing these programs?
The challenge really is initially very in the very early stages was getting the buy-in.
Right.
You know, getting the buy-in from people that we would have to work with is because we hadn't done it. Nobody had done it. So it was just, how do we demonstrate that this is going to work? So that was a challenge. Another challenge was getting the trust of both the victim and the offenders.
Right.
A lot of the offenders we talked to had been through the system, so there was a lot of cynicism as
Right.
well. Okay, is this another program
Right.
that we're going through because the system needs to check this off? So we had to generally work extra hard to demonstrate to them that we really did want them to be helped.
Right.
And not come back here. So those were some of the new challenges. The other challenge was internal to us at PCP, was we had to learn new skills. So to be able to deliver a really good, strong program, we had to work extra hard
Right.
to learn ourselves, to learn new skills, new, just new things.
Right.
And really, we had to place ourselves as well in the shoes of both the victim and offender, because when we're teaching victim-offender empathy, we need to get into this space as well. Another challenge was because of the nature of the subjects we were dealing in.
Right.
The question for us was, how do we take care of ourselves?
Right.
So self-care was very important for us. And we had to make some critical decisions on how do we manage our staff. Do we take time off from the program to get them counseled, to bring
Right.
them back
Yeah.
on a normal note? Or because we have now people looking at us to take them through their process, do we push on?
Right.
So, it was a lot of balancing and making critical decisions. But these were some of the things that we need to continue to work with. And in terms of retributive justice, of course, that's a system that's embedded. It's, has been in place
Right.
for a very long time. We found that for people that were practitioners on the ground, they were willing to embrace this very quickly, but it's always about in convincing somebody higher up
Right.
to allow them to do it.
Right.
So there was a lot of negotiation and a lot of challenges. Going out in the community as well is people have been harmed. There are a lot of angry people out
Right.
there. Is convincing them that they need to embrace this person coming out. Otherwise, none of us can walk this path
Right.
peacefully,
Right.
So it was all of that. Handling emotions, seeking approvals, learning.
Right.
Yeah, it was a new thing for all of us.
Right.
And just a lot of time out for ourselves as well, because a lot of abuse sometimes would come our way as well for
Right.
introducing something so new and then trying to convince people it's going to work. So it was managing a lot of emotions and a lot of people who are also angry and hurt. So we understand where they're coming from.
Right. As citizens or members of the larger community, what can we be doing to help support programs like this?
I think for people that work in communities, it's always good to learn some peace-building tools. And I'm not putting in a plug for PCP, but peace-building tools really make a difference to the interventions you know. It enables people to focus on the issue and not on the individual.
Right.
And once we're able to do that, we're able to determine what it is we want
Right.
and how we're going to get there. So the biggest lesson for all of us in this is we must all make that extra effort to learn how to manage our problems. And we can only manage our problems if we learn to address the issues. So there are numerous tools, and peace-building tools are very important to get to know. Another thing is dialogue. We must create spaces for dialogue. We must create safe spaces for dialogue. And the tools, the peace-building tools that I'm talking about, will get us to that space.
Okay. A final question related to this. What ways do you think, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that for example in Pacific communities, because we're smaller and maybe as a result therefore more open and knowing each other to be this, what other resources do you think are there within Pacific societies that would support these kinds of programs?
Well, I think our culture, to start off with, is very strong, and restorative justice fits right into our culture. We're a culture, we're a communal people. We live and support each other. Yeah. And then also in Fiji, if you look, we have we all talanoa, you know. It's just our culture. We sit and talk about things.
Right.
We just don't stand up and go and take people to court. We're not a community, we're not a society of suing each other over little things. We talanoa. So I think that's, we sometimes treat talanoa as too casual a term, but that's, when we look back in history, that's a peace-building tool that our forefathers used to address problems. So I think it's blending things like that that'll really engage this process better.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for being here and contributing to this conversation and the work that you and PCP has been doing.
Thank you, Dr. Min. Can I just add one more thing?
Yes, of course.
And you can edit this and put it back into our Pacific context. I think the other thing in the Pacific, which is very important, is the leadership structures. Yeah. So we have traditional leaders at community level, at village level, you know, in families. So the leadership structure is very important. So when we go through our family group counseling, we tend to lean on that.
Right.
Because the offender or the victim may feel safer when one of their leaders is there. Or they'll feel safer knowing that because their traditional system is there to back them up, the offender will not come back to reoffend. So that structure is important. It's not a new idea that's introduced, but it's being introduced into a set space that can support its continuity. And what I also wanted to add, sorry, I talk too much.
No, this is great.
I leave things out. In terms of our current, in terms of our restorative justice program, so we work with the Fiji Corrections Services on the one hand, but because our prisons are so full of young people, we know that there's early intervention is also very important. So we work very closely with the Fiji Police Force Blue Light program from the Fiji Police Force Juvenile Unit.
Right.
So what we do is we work in the schools and we introduce peace-building tools in schools with school management, with the teachers that handle discipline, and prefects and head boys and head girls.
Right.
So they go through a similar training that we do for the Fiji Corrections Services. This is more to empower young leaders with skills to manage problems.
Right.
So we encourage them to use peacebuilding tools and manage disciplinary issues in school. So if a student, continuously steals from another student,
Right.
rather than suspending that person
Right.
from school, which creates further, trouble and gets that young boy or
Labeled.
girl into further problems because they're now unable to complete school. They're going to, hang out in the city
Right.
and probably hang out with wrong groups, creating a new cycle of violence. We introduce this at school level so the teachers can now bring the participants of this incident together, talk about it, determine what the problem was, and then, move on. So I'm going to demonstrate this by a case
Right.
in a recent school that we intervened in. So we had 5 students who were prefects, head boy and head girl, attend our training that we ran. There was a student that continued to steal from others, and what happened is the students would know who did it. What would happen was when it happened, or with whether with this particular student or with others,
Right.
To keep it generic. Whenever the incident happened, a group of boys would take discipline in their own hands. So there'd be beating after
Right.
school,
Right.
there'd be punch-ups, and students would not come back to school. Sometimes they're so badly beaten up, somebody would be expelled. So after the training, there was a marked difference there.
Okay.
They started, talking about why there was this continuous stealing, and they determined that it was, in one incident, it was determined that the parents of one particular student had separated, so the boy would be getting money from the father. He was living with the mother. He'd be getting money from his father every fortnight.
Right.
So if there was, a need for something in school, in between time, he would steal. So now the school has a support out of the processes. The school now has a support system. The students are now putting in money when they have extra, and so when there's a need, they ask around, is somebody short of this or that or the other, and they buy from the common
Right.
common fund. So it's these kinds of things we want changes. We're not breaking just the cycle of violence now. We're building a community of responsible young people who will be our leaders, So these are the wider effects of this.
I think that's actually a great example to end with,
Yeah.
because from all the research on crime and deviance, it shows very clearly that if you can if you can deal with these issues early on, like the things that are creating and pushing young people into it, you can change the direction of both their lives and the people around them.
Absolutely.
So this is it's actually a wonderful example to end with. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.